Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace this incredible chain reaction happening across India, one of the nations most vulnerable to climate change. We're going to see how just one environmental shift can set off a cascade of consequences, just like a line of dominoes all set to fall.
And you know, it all really kicks off with a single number. This one figure pretty much sets the stage for everything else we're going to talk about. 58%.
Yeah, 58%. Just think about that. That's the chunk of India's population whose entire survival is directly tied to the land. This massive dependence is our first, most critical domino, and it makes the whole country incredibly sensitive to even the smallest environmental change.
So you might be wondering, why is India so uniquely vulnerable here? Well, it's not just about farming. It's actually a combination of factors that all converge to really amplify the risk. I mean, just think about this perfect storm. You've got a massive, dense population. A huge portion of those people are already dealing with poverty. The economy is fundamentally linked to climate patterns, like the monsoon. And then on top of all that, you have a 7,000-kilometer coastline exposed to the seas. It's this specific mix of people, economics, and geography that just magnifies the impact of every single degree of warming.
Okay, so now let's watch that first domino actually get pushed. We'll start with the direct, physical changes that are literally warping the environment itself. This is really where the chain reaction gets going.
And wow, this is a staggering figure. Projections show that India's average annual temperature could soar by up to 4.3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. Now, this isn't just things getting a little warmer. This is a fundamental rewrite of the country's entire climate.
And that heat, it has a dramatic and immediate effect up in the Himalayas. Crucial glaciers like the Gangotri, the very source of some of India's biggest rivers, are retreating at an alarming rate. We're talking 28 meters every single year.
And this leads to something really dangerous and kind of deceptive, a paradox. In the short term, all that melting ice actually swells the rivers, right? This leads to more frequent and destructive floods. But in the long term, as those glaciers, the source of all that water, shrink and disappear, the rivers that millions depend on will start to run dry. It's this devastating cycle of too much and then way, way too little.
So who's actually at risk here? The retreat of these Himalayan water towers, and that's really what they are. It isn't just some abstract ecological event. It is a direct threat to the very lifeline of the entire region.
We're talking about the great rivers of the subcontinent, the Indus, the Ganga, the Brahmaputra. The irrigation that feeds millions, the food on their tables, the hydropower that keeps the lights on, all of it is directly tied to the fate of this melting ice.
And at the same time this is happening, the monsoon, the absolute lifeblood of India's agriculture, is becoming dangerously unpredictable. It's just lurching between these wild extremes. That means the dry years get even drier, fueling widespread drought, while the wet years unleash more intense, more destructive storms.
So, how do all these physical changes start to impact the most basic human needs? Let's follow the chain reaction as it knocks over the next set of dominoes, creating a huge crisis for food and water.
The impact on agriculture is just immediate and stark. Extreme heat and those unpredictable rains are projected to cause staple crop yields in South Asia to plummet by over 10%. And look at that time frame. This isn't some distant future we're talking about. This is projected to happen within the next decade.
And here's the crucial point. This isn't just a problem for farmers. This domino hits the entire nation's food security. It could potentially double the country's reliance on imported grain, exposing it to all kinds of volatile global markets.
This food crisis is then compounded by a severe water crisis. With unpredictable rivers and rapidly depleting groundwater, the pressure on this already overstressed resource is just becoming immense. As one source puts it, the consequences of this water scarcity will be felt severely across India.
But the chain reaction doesn't stop with farms and rivers. The final dominoes to fall are the most devastating: human health and the stability of the entire economy.
Let's talk about the economic toll for a second, because it's staggering. And get this, even way back in 2009, before the worst effects of climate change were really being felt, the cost of environmental degradation was already estimated at a massive 5.7% of India's entire GDP. That cost, driven by things like pollution, resource loss, and soil degradation, represents a continuous and massive drain on the nation's economic potential.
The impacts aren't just economic either. They're biological.
warmer temperatures are literally redrawing the map for infectious diseases, allowing them to invade new territories that were previously too cool for them to survive.
This is so startling. You can see how diseases are crossing historical and geographical boundaries. Malaria, for example, is now appearing in the Himalayan foothills. Dengue is spreading to new regions. And of course, these extreme weather events create the perfect breeding grounds for waterborne illnesses and, of course, deadly heat waves.
Ultimately, when a land can no longer support you, what do? You move. These combined pressures can force people from their homes, creating what's known as climate migration. And this, in turn, can lead to increased competition for already scarce resources, which threatens social stability.
So, when you connect all these dots, from a single melting glacier in the Himalayas to social unrest in a crowded city, it paints this clear and honestly pretty sobering picture. India is facing an unprecedented and deeply interconnected challenge, where a problem in one area very quickly becomes a crisis in another.
And this leaves us with one final profound question, doesn't it? How does a nation build a secure future when the very environment it depends on is in constant flux? It's not about solving a single problem anymore. It's about finding a new way to live and a world where all the dominoes have already begun to fall.